if you look at the motivation of piracy on the top list, you will find among the main reasons is that people cannot do with the content similar things they can do with the content they just downloaded from somewhere. So definitely this has to happen, because otherwise we will make more pirates than today, and the people are willing to pay for a valuable enough experience. People want content to be portable, flexible. They want it with them, whether in their home or beyond, because with portable multimedia players or mobiles, you can also take the content with you, and teenagers mainly will not adopt any service if it doesn't allow that. So we need to make that happen, and for that to happen, we need a kind of interoperability on the security level in order to be sure that we are in a security domain that we control more or less. We've been talking about content security as somehow the preventer, something that prevents business from happening. Actually, it's not. Security in that perspective means more enabling business model, enabling flexibility in usage, and it's kind of balancing the end user legitimate requirements and expectation from one end, and on the other end, what the content owners' willingness to authorize as a possible use of the content.
Is the problem therefore more to do with the attitude of the content owner versus the demand of the content user than it is to do with the technology? I mean, are you, as a technology provider, do you feel that if content owners said, actually, yeah, we've got to do this, we've got to provide all content on all devices at all times, you can provide the technology that will protect it?
Well, I think we can provide the technology. It's definitely not perfect today, and has probably to evolve, but in any case, content owners will be well advised to speed up the process, because on the other hand, again, what's happening on the false-free world is that most of these usage are already there. So if they wait long, they are taking risk that the music, that what happened to music may happen again to the video, and it will be simply catastrophic. But
so in other words, consumers will find their own ways to make content available on all devices. I mean, you're probably closer to the content guys than the rest of us. I mean, how do you see attitudes evolving?
To the earlier question, I think there is this growing belief that, there's a principle that says if you can allow access to content to your consumers, the Martini media principle, anytime, anywhere, any place, and you can provide rigorous enough controls or safeguards, the kind of fortress concept, or an environment where it can be consumed so that there is no additional leakage. So what you pay for what you get, and that's kind of all. So it's a very straight transaction. Certainly, our sense is that there's a big willingness to do that, and I think if you look at some of the erosion of some of the existing revenue streams, particularly in the US, whether it's DVD units, whether it be subscriber churn on certain other environments, you have a deficit. There are many figures about the leakage of piracy, very high, middling, but they never tend to be very low. Then there is a pool of content that obviously is being consumed in a inappropriate way, to put it politely. And I think to Nuruddin's point, the reasons why iTunes was very successful was actually because it was simple, relatively cost efficient, so it was a good user experience. Because people were, stealing stuff, if that be the right word, historically, but then a kind of efficient, clean mechanism was evolved that meant that they legitimised the transaction. They were no longer seen as thieves. And I think that's the job for us, as a community to, enable that commerce.
Do you see a compatibility between the desire of the consumer to have content everywhere all the time, and obviously the desire of the content owner to sell it everywhere all the time, if they can make it secure? And the analogy of the music industry is often used, that it went to hell in a handbasket because it didn't connect with its consumers soon enough to deliver the kind of content they wanted in the way they wanted. But on the other hand, audio is relatively easy to protect. It was relatively easy to come up with a system that did, like iTunes, once it was there, completely sort of clean up. Obviously, mixed media, video media, and in particular premium media is a lot more difficult to deal with.
Yes, but there's also another difference. Let's remember that when we used to buy CDs, when we buy CDs, we buy 11, 12, 13 songs, from which we like 2. And that's also what led iTunes to be so successful. You only buy what you want to buy. When you buy a movie, you buy a movie. You don't buy a third of a movie. So that's already something which is a little bit different. I think that the challenge for the media industry in the movie area is a big challenge because, as we said it, we're moving from having revenues from DVDs and people going to movie theaters, switching to I'm going to have the content home through pay TV, and that's the spread of video on demand and push video on demand that is accelerating right now. So that means the revenues of the content providers is going to come in the future mainly from these pay TV operators. So we have to fulfill the requirements of the end users that will want this content to be theirs on different mobile and not mobile equipment, and the legitimate expectation of the content providers who want money for what they have developed. And our job is to push for more security, and that's why we push at Logiways. We push for something which is. I come from another industry. I used to be in the aerospace business. In aerospace, security is something you don't play with, and it's not an option. Because if you play with security, the plane crashes. Okay, so that's a bit different. So you get a lot of standards that you have to fulfill to be able to be in a plane. I was very surprised when I arrived in this industry. We have no standards. In security, we have none. The only thing which is appearing to become a standard is the common criteria / ISO 15408 that could be a standard saying, okay, you have to meet this level of criteria in order to say, yes, you can be safe. I wouldn't even say you are safe, because that would be really... So I think that's what we miss also. We miss a standard for guaranteeing to the content providers that we are able, as technology companies, to meet certain level of standards that can guarantee that all the processes of the company and everything that has been done state of the art to make sure that we're going to do the best security you can ask for. And that's the first step. And then we have to move to integrating in our thoughts, that we all do, I believe that my colleagues do the same, well, just to adapt our technology to what the end user is willing to get. So that's a tough challenge, but that's a very interesting challenge because that's where technology makes the difference.
Talking about standards and from a technical point of view, I mean, obviously one of the things that's holding back, full-blown home networking is a lack of standards in terms of consumer devices and in terms of the kind of networks that go beyond the access point to the house. And we've got DLNA, we've got Open IPTV, we've got about 3 or 4 others. And CA is going to have to fit into that ecosystem. And CA itself, Albert said, should have standards in terms of a level of security they can meet. But should CA or encryption systems also have their own standards, or are standards another invitation to piracy, in the sense that if you make standardized products in the CA realm, then that means that the hackers can approach it in a standard way?
Well, it's true that standards will help a lot on the cost of equipment and deployment and that kind of things. But in this environment, then it's different from safety of airlines and whatever. It's so that somebody has to know the key. And the key is the thing that if it comes out, it's jeopardizing the whole operation. So then a standard cannot help you there. Somebody has to take the responsibility for the security, for the protection. And the way it has been evolving in pay TV is that the CAS vendors actually take that responsibility. The opposite would be that a standardization committee took that kind of responsibility. And a standardization committee cannot take that responsibility. And standards also, what we have when we one key thing, one important thing, central thing, when it comes to piracy. If you have erosion after, as I say, 4 years, maybe they eroded a hole, then there is, we have seen this, and the 4 year I mentioned because that's for over 20 years we can see that that's the average time until smart card generation has been broken down. But then after the let's say 4 years, 5 years maybe sometimes, then you need swift reaction, because once the hacker and somewhere you've heard or found out that the hacker is coming through, then you have maybe 6 months before to stop before this goes into piracy, commercial piracy. So then, ideal thing is that you shall have replaced the security within those 6 months. And then if you have to arrange for a standardization committee to meet again, to reform, to do something new, then it's impractical, and then the guy that suffers is the operator.
I think we have to define standards that are going to qualify that the way we've done things. As put as much security. Yes, it's on process. It's on defining standards, because the more standardized we're going to be, the easier it's going to be for the guys in front of us to hack us. So it has to be unstandardized as much as possible in what we do, but the processes must be standardized so that we can prove to a certain extent that we did the best that could be done for security.
For me, the standards is clearly very important because, first of all, for interoperability. I mean, we will not have had the success of digital pay TV if it wasn't based on the AVV and PEG2 standard that Holo&I was at that time already taking part of. And so standards are key, because without standard, the industry cannot build appropriate puzzles that work together.
But these are standards in the transmission systems and not in the means of conditional access.
Actually, even in the conditional access systems, they are most of the time using parts that are clearly standardized up to the cryptography, because in the cryptography, for example, the strongest algorithms are those coming from standards, because they have been through a number of certification, validation, they've been exposed enough to hackers. And a joint point of certification or validation, standard of validation of security will definitely add kind of confidence around our solutions. And to come back to renewability, as I mentioned earlier, yes, we need to be responsive enough, and at Viaccess we take it even further and introducing every 2 years a new generation of smart card, and we even have a business model for our customers that they don't care about which generation, they always get the next one, and they don't have to at some point consider repaying for a new generation.
No, our view is if we can kind of go one level up, if you will, and to provide marking mechanisms, watermarking or fingerprinting that are agnostic to various systems that might sit in either adjacent or below or above, then that's better for, obviously it's better for us, but it's better for the the content owner themselves, I think, and also the ecosystem generally. So our view, I think, is really more that if we can be agnostic, it's helpful. I don't think the exigencies that prevail upon the CAS community are quite the same for us, because of the way we do our different businesses. So I don't think we actually are driving towards standardization in either fingerprinting or watermarking, although our friends at the MPAA are driving down that path at the moment. They're looking at certainly benchmarking some of the fingerprinting systems, of which there are now a fair few. Historically, they've been done on watermarking. So I think there is a broad consensus, but I suppose it's not a standardization program.